To have somebody who is kind of epitomizes what you think your country stands for has always been a major ambition.
In the shadows of royal grandeur, one woman's quiet resilience begins to reshape the monarchy. For years, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood like a still flame in the middle of a storm. Surrounded by tradition, ceremony, and centuries of rigid royal protocol, she never tried to outshine the crown. She didn't need to. Her presence alone became a symbol of calm strength, graceful, measured, and unmistakably powerful. The world watched her walk beside Prince William at engagements, waving politely, smiling gently, yet never stepping out of line. And while others in the royal circle sought attention or controversy, Catherine quietly became indispensable. She was never officially at the center of the throne's narrative, but somehow, every eye always found her. To the public, she was the perfect duchess, supportive, composed, dutiful. The kind of woman who seemed born for royalty, even though she wasn't. A woman who brought modern softness into a world of stone-faced tradition. But while the cameras captured her curated appearances, what they missed was the growing respect she was quietly earning behind palace doors. The Queen saw it. So did Princess Anne. And slowly, even if he didn't want to, so did King Charles. There were whispers in the corridors of Buckingham Palace. Whispers that Catherine wasn't just a future queen consort, but something more, something rare. She possessed a kind of grounded wisdom the royal family desperately needed in the age of scandal, rejection, and public doubt. While others were falling apart in front of headlines, Catherine stood taller. She said little but communicated volumes. Every subtle act, every visit, every word seemed to carry the weight of a future not yet spoken aloud. And still, she waited. Waited without complaint. Waited without expectation. Inside the palace, this patience didn't go unnoticed. Over time, even the staff who had seen decades of royals come and go began to speak differently about her. There was admiration. There was trust. The kind of trust that cannot be bought by a title or inherited by bloodline. It's earned in silence, in consistency, in showing up when no one else does. And that's exactly what Catherine had done for over a decade. Silently, power began to orbit around her. Not through command, but through character. But what no one knew, not even Catherine herself, was that a decision had already been made, years earlier. A message sealed in handwriting only one woman dared to keep safe. It wasn't addressed to King Charles. It wasn't left for Prince William. It was meant for Catherine. And when the Queen passed, that quiet message long buried in the silence of tradition began to echo louder than any royal decree. As the nation mourned the loss of its longest reigning monarch, a concealed truth emerged, poised to redefine royal legacies. A letter, untouched for years, holds the weight of a monarch's final wish. Tucked away in a quiet corner of the palace, far from the public eye, and even further from royal protocol, was a letter that no one was supposed to find, at least not until the moment was right. Queen Elizabeth II, known for her stoic presence and unwavering devotion to duty, had written it not long before her passing. But unlike her carefully crafted speeches or the scripted public appearances that marked her reign, this message was deeply personal. It wasn't meant for Parliament. It wasn't even meant for the new king. It was entrusted to her daughter Princess Anne, quietly, privately, and without fanfare. And for years, Anne said nothing. It wasn't until the Queen was gone that Anne finally stepped forward. Her decision wasn't made lightly. She had held onto the letter like a sacred vow, knowing the impact it could have. And when the world turned its gaze toward the crown's next chapter, Anne chose a single night to change everything. No press, no royal fanfare, just a room, a table, and the Queen's final words sealed in aged paper. When the envelope was opened, its contents didn't speak of Charles's role or William's destiny. It wasn't about succession charts or ceremonial duties. It was about Catherine. The Queen's thoughts were not a reflection of lineage, but of leadership. She had seen something in Catherine long before the world did something unshakable. Grace under pressure, patience in chaos, the kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, but simply endures. The letter named Catherine not as a consort, but as a cornerstone. For Charles and William, reading those words was like walking into a room where the air had been pulled out. Shock doesn't begin to cover it. For a man who had waited his entire life to wear the crown, and a son raised to follow in that path, the idea that the Queen's final thoughts didn't center on either of them was almost unbearable. But the Queen had not written her message for comfort. She had written it for clarity. The future, in her eyes, wasn't about who had been born into the role. It was about who had earned it. This wasn't an official decree. It couldn't be. The crown doesn't shift hands with a letter, but its symbolism was undeniable. The monarch who had overseen more change than any before her had left behind a final act of quiet revolution. And now, Anne had placed that truth directly into the hands of the very men it would shake to the core. The revelation sent ripples through the royal lineage, challenging long-held expectations. Shock reverberates through gilded halls as destiny takes an unexpected turn. The silence in the palace was deafening. After the letter had been read, nothing felt the same. The grandeur of the room, the portraits of ancestors, the echoes of monarchs past, suddenly felt like walls closing in. King Charles sat frozen, eyes wide, breath shallow. His fingers trembled as he let the paper slip from his hand onto the polished table. This wasn't the kind of disruption he had prepared for. He had spent decades building his life around a destiny, only to discover his mother's final vision had pointed somewhere else. The crown he had finally claimed now felt like a question mark, and the woman who had quietly stood beside William for years had become the answer he hadn't expected and wasn't sure he could accept. Across from him, William sat in stunned silence. His heart pounded louder than any royal march he had ever walked to. It wasn't just disbelief, it was betrayal. Not from Anne, and not even from the Queen, but from fate itself. He had been raised for this. Every gesture, every word, every step since his childhood had been carefully shaped to prepare him for kingship. And now, what did it mean? If the Queen's trust, her deepest confidence, had been placed in his wife, not in him. He wasn't angry with Catherine, he loved her. But somewhere deep inside, the weight of that love clashed with the cracks forming in his identity. Was he to lead the monarchy, or follow the woman beside him into a future not designed for him? Princess Anne, however, remained unshaken. Her voice had carried no tremor when she read the letter. Her posture never faltered. She wasn't seeking approval. She was honoring her mother's truth. Anne knew exactly what that letter would ignite, but she delivered it anyway. Because in a family that had for too long buried honesty beneath duty, she chose loyalty to the Queen's intention over loyalty to unspoken expectations. She saw the truth for what it was, a necessary reckoning. The room simmered with unspoken tension. Generational pride met modern purpose. Old ideas of succession slammed into a rapidly changing world. The monarch's word was once law, but now it was legacy. And legacies were far more complicated. This wasn't about removing Charles or discrediting William. It was about shifting vision, adapting to a public that no longer bowed blindly, and placing the future in the hands of someone who had never asked for power, but had quietly earned the people's trust. Inside the palace, the walls were still standing. The chandeliers still sparkled, but something deeper had fractured. A rebalancing had begun, subtle yet irreversible. Titles and bloodlines may have drawn the family tree, but the Queen's final words had redrawn its roots. Beyond the palace gates, the public remained unaware of the seismic shifts occurring within. From commoner to confidant of the crown, Catherine's path is anything but ordinary. Born far from the corridors of power and the rituals of monarchy, Catherine Elizabeth Middleton entered the world in a modest hospital room in Reading, England. There were no royal titles attached to her name, no ancient lineage carrying the weight of expectation. Her childhood was quiet but purposeful, grounded in a family that valued hard work, integrity, and quiet ambition. Her father, Michael, worked in aviation. Her mother, Carol, turned a simple idea party supplies into a thriving business. Together, they built a life that, while not royal, was rich in the values that would one day make Catherine stand out in a palace of privilege. Catherine's early years were defined not by luxury, but by effort. She moved with her family to Jordan as a child, attending an English-speaking nursery while her father worked overseas. Even at that age, she learned how to adapt, how to watch quietly before stepping forward. That calm observation, that unspoken strength, would one day set her apart from every other royal figure. By the time her family returned to England and settled in Bucklebury, Catherine had already developed a quiet confidence that made her stand out not through volume, but presence. At Seaside Marlborough College, she wasn't just another student. She was a force, captain of the hockey team, recipient of the Gold Duke of Edinburgh Award, and a natural leader among her peers. But even then, there were no cameras chasing her, no headlines shouting her name. She studied art history, earned respect through humility, and never once imagined the destiny that was quietly waiting to unfold. She was focused, resilient, and grounded traits that would soon be tested in ways no classroom could prepare her for. Meeting Prince William at the University of St. Andrews was the beginning of a relationship that would rewrite her life. What started as friendship soon bloomed into something deeper, something far more scrutinized than either of them could have imagined. Overnight, the girl next door became front-page material. The headlines came fast. So did the criticism. The Bapiki pressure to perform, to fit in, to become someone the world thought a royal should be, it was relentless. But Catherine never chased the crown. She walked her own path. Even when William broke off their relationship in 2007, she didn't crumble. She didn't lash out. She didn't speak a word to the press. Instead, she stood tall, focused on her own journey, and returned stronger. And when they reunited, it was different. The world saw her not as a woman waiting to be chosen, but as a woman who had chosen herself. Her wedding in 2011 wasn't just a royal affair, it was a statement. A commoner had risen not because she sought power, but because she embodied it. Over time, Catherine began to balance the impossible. The demands of royal duty, the spotlight of motherhood, the weight of public expectations. And still, she did it without noise, without complaint. Her grace was her shield, and her silence spoke louder than any speech ever could. As Catherine embraced her role, the world began to see her not just as a duchess, but as a potential guiding force for the monarchy. Admiration grows not from titles, but from authenticity and grace. In a world where royal status often overshadows substance, Catherine emerged as something different, genuine. Her quiet demeanor didn't need to be performed. Her kindness wasn't rehearsed. From the moment she stepped into the public eye, people felt something they hadn't in years from the monarchy: connection. It wasn't about gowns or crowns. It was about her ability to make strangers feel seen, heard, and cared for. Whether shaking hands with hospital workers or kneeling to meet a child at eye level, Catherine wasn't putting on a show. She was showing up, and the world took notice. Her popularity wasn't built overnight. It came in layers: each public appearance, each charity event, each speech carefully crafted, not for applause, but for purpose. Catherine's focus on mental health advocacy didn't just raise awareness, it shifted the conversation. In a family known for its stoicism, she spoke openly about the importance of emotional well-being. Not in a way that demanded sympathy or headlines, but with a tone of shared humanity. She aligned herself with causes that mattered deeply to ordinary people: early childhood development, addiction recovery, and trauma support, cementing her role not just as a duchess, but as a public servant. The world wasn't watching her because they had to. They watched because she gave them something real, and that authenticity began to form a stark contrast within the royal family itself. While scandals brewed around Prince Andrew and skepticism shadowed Camilla's position, Catherine became the monarchy's most unshakable figure. Unlike others, she didn't lean on legacy to earn respect. She built it day by day, act by act. Public polls started showing the shift. It was no longer Prince William at the center of attention, it was his wife. The same woman once dubbed Commoner Kate now stood as a symbol of continuity, compassion, and calm in a royal household increasingly seen as fragile. The media, often cruel and invasive, tried to twist her image in the beginning. They questioned her ambition. They criticized her wardrobe. They created a nickname, Weighty Katie, to mock her patience. But over time, their narrative changed. They couldn't deny the consistency of her actions. She wasn't chasing cameras or headlines. And slowly, the press began to do what they rarely do. They respected her. Because even they saw that this woman had managed to hold her dignity in a palace often pulled apart by drama and dissent. As the years passed, a growing belief began to take shape, not just in the public square, but in private conversations across Britain and beyond. Catherine wasn't simply part of the royal family. She might be its future. She embodied what people wanted in a modern monarch: relatability, compassion, and strength without arrogance. Not someone born to rule, but someone who had become worthy of it through action. Her influence extended beyond tradition. It reached into the heart of what the monarchy needed to survive. Yet, with rising prominence comes intensified scrutiny and internal challenges. In the face of adversity, true character is revealed. Catherine never asked to be tested, but the crown doesn't care about comfort. The moment she stepped into the royal spotlight, her life became a minefield of scrutiny, speculation, and silent wars. The press, once merely curious, turned vicious. Every smile was dissected, every glance debated. Stories emerged that weren't just cruel, they were calculated. Her upbringing was questioned, her intentions doubted. She was labeled Weighty Katie, a nickname meant to belittle her patience, when in truth, that patience would become one of her greatest strengths. While others buckled under far less, Catherine never gave them the satisfaction of watching her fall. She walked through the storm without blinking, and the pressure didn't stop at headlines. Behind the palace gates, she faced expectations no one could truly prepare for: to be the perfect mother, the flawless royal, the constant symbol of stability. While the public saw polished portraits and curated appearances, they didn't see the relentless grind underneath. Juggling school runs with state dinners, waking up to care for her children, only to step into meetings with world leaders hours later. There was no playbook for what she was doing. No previous royal had balanced modern motherhood and monarchy with such grace. But Catherine didn't just manage, she mastered it. Still, maintaining balance in a house that thrives on tradition wasn't easy. The institution has rules, many unwritten, most unspoken. And those rules were never designed for someone like her. Every action was measured against outdated ideals. She wasn't born into this. She didn't have centuries of nobility in her blood. And yet, she carried herself with more dignity than many who did. She never tried to force her way in. She earned her place by showing up calm, composed, and unwavering. And that quiet defiance, choosing consistency over conflict, made her both admired and resented. Catherine found strength not by isolating herself, but by choosing her circle wisely. She leaned on her family, her parents, her siblings, people who reminded her of who she was before the palace. And she leaned on William, not as a future king, but as her partner. Together, they created moments of normalcy within chaos: family dinners, bedtime stories, silent walks in the garden. These weren't escapes from her role. They were the fuel that kept her grounded within it. Her support system wasn't just emotional, it was strategic, and it made her unshakable. Every challenge she faced became a quiet chapter in her transformation. She didn't just survive the fire, she became forged by it. That's what set her apart. In a monarchy built on appearance, Catherine embodied substance. She wasn't defined by the attacks or the applause. Her resilience came not from seeking control, but from mastering self-control. And slowly, without ever raising her voice, she became the most trusted figure in a fractured institution. As internal and external pressures mount, the monarchy stands at a crossroads. Tradition meets transformation in the corridors of power. The British monarchy stands at a precipice, its foundations steeped in centuries of ceremony, but its future clouded by uncertainty. For generations, succession followed a clear line etched in bloodlines, ordained by tradition. But today, whispers echo louder than proclamations. Behind closed doors and beneath polished crowns, questions are stirring that the royal family can no longer ignore. Is lineage alone enough? Can rituals survive relevance? And more pressingly, what if the crown must evolve to survive? The old answers are no longer enough. The world has changed, and so must the monarchy. At the center of this reckoning stands a figure no one predicted, yet everyone now watches Catherine. The woman once called an outsider is now the embodiment of everything the modern monarchy must become. While debates rage about relevance, about outdated roles and dwindling influence, Catherine has already been shaping a new narrative. Not by force, not by ambition, but by living it. Her work in mental health, her ability to speak directly to the people's needs, her presence in schools, hospitals, shelters, not just as a figurehead, but as a listener, has redefined what royal service looks like. And the public sees it. More than that, they believe in it. Polls show a dramatic shift. The reverence once reserved for queens born into power now belongs to a woman who earned respect through action. Younger generations, who once shrugged at the monarchy's relevance, now see something different in her. A bridge between the past and the future. A figure rooted in tradition, but not buried by it. While Charles wears the crown and William waits in line, it's Catherine who seems to carry the people's hope. Not just because she's poised, but because she's proven. In a time when faith in institutions is waning, Catherine offers something rare: trust. And yet, the palace is torn. Some advisors cling to custom, fearful of what change might dismantle. Others push for modernization, knowing that survival demands evolution. The balance between heritage and progress has never been more fragile. Should the monarchy remain untouched, preserved like a museum piece? Or should it adapt fluid, responsive, and accountable? These aren't questions the crown can ignore much longer. With global scrutiny, national identity at stake, and internal fractures widening, the choice is no longer whether to change. The only question is who will lead it. In that unfolding debate, scenarios emerge. A future where Catherine becomes not just a queen consort, but a strategic force shaping policy, public outreach, and royal direction. A future where her children grow into a monarchy reimagined through empathy and accessibility, not isolation. And perhaps, a future where the true legacy of Queen Elizabeth's final wish isn't disruption, but rebirth. In the midst of uncertainty, one constant remains: the enduring strength found in quiet leadership. Sometimes, the most profound impact comes from the softest voice. Catherine's journey was never defined by loud ambition or dramatic gestures. Her rise was not marked by scandal, nor by public declarations of power. Instead, she quietly moved through the chaos, steady, graceful, and impossibly calm. And now, as the royal family grapples with a rapidly shifting world, it's her quiet strength that stands as its most unshakable pillar. The woman who was once dismissed as too quiet, too ordinary, too patient, has become the very embodiment of modern resilience. Not because she forced change, but because she allowed it to find its voice through her. The letter left behind by Queen Elizabeth was not just a final note, it was a verdict, a revelation, a passing of trust from the longest reigning monarch in Citoyen history to the most unlikely successor of spirit. The Queen didn't write it to change the line of succession. She wrote it to change perception. She saw in Catherine what others had overlooked: a leader forged not by entitlement, but by endurance. A woman who, without ever demanding the spotlight, earned it. And in doing so, she redefined what strength looks like in the modern monarchy. Today, Catherine stands as more than a duchess or a future queen. She is a symbol of something the royal family has long struggled to project: authenticity. While others stumbled through controversy or clung to outdated traditions, she adapted without losing her center. She never sought attention, yet the public followed her. She didn't campaign for influence, yet she became one of the most trusted figures in the monarchy. In every crisis, she offered calm. In every moment of uncertainty, she chose consistency. Her legacy may not be chiseled into stone just yet, but it is already written in the hearts of those who believe that leadership can be compassionate, and that power doesn't have to be loud to be lasting. If the monarchy is to survive the generational shift that lies ahead, it won't be through ceremony alone. It will be through relevance, through a connection to the people it represents. And Catherine, through her humility, her empathy, and her undeniable strength, has proven she can be that connection. She has become the bridge between a fading empire and a new age of accountability and service. Her legacy, still unfolding, could reshape not only the institution she married into, but the very definition of royal leadership for generations to come. Because in the end, legacy isn't measured by the crown on your head. It's measured by the lives you touch, the values you uphold, and the quiet moments of courage that shift the course of history. Catherine never had to shout to be heard. She never had to demand her place to earn it. She simply remained true to who she was, and in doing so, she became the voice of a new era. As the monarchy navigates the tides of change, it is the unwavering, silent strength of figures like Catherine that may well anchor its future. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.